Mrs. Whitfield, we need you to remove all jewelry before prep. Of course. Give me 1 second with my husband.
Keisha, wait.
Wait for what? Your phone is buzzing again.
It's nothing. Turn it off. I'll turn it off.
You've turned that phone face down 4 times since we got here. Who keeps calling you 40 minutes before I go under a knife for you?
Please. Not now.
Then when? When exactly is the right time to tell me the truth? Mrs. Whitfield, we're ready for you. 1 more minute. My husband has something to say. We need to get you ready for pre-op now. The doctor will be in shortly.
I have replayed those 40 minutes so many times that I could recite them the way other women recite scripture. I know exactly what the clock said when the phone first lit up on the little rolling table beside my hospital bed. 6:47 in the morning, the fluorescent lights humming that particular hospital hum that sounds like the building itself is holding its breath. I know that my IV had already been placed in the back of my left hand, a small mercy since I am right-handed and would need that hand later, for reasons I did not yet understand, to hold a phone of my own and read a message that would end my marriage as I had known it. 40 minutes. That is all the time I had left to be the woman I thought I was. I want to tell you up front that this is not a story about a man who cheated on his wife, though for a while I believed it was. And I let myself believe it, because a cheating husband is a wound I understood the shape of. Half the women in my family had survived one. I knew the choreography, the deleted texts, the sudden gym membership, the phone that requires a passcode when it never used to. What I did not know, what none of us in that pre-op room could have predicted, was that the real betrayal in my marriage had nothing to do with another woman's perfume on his collar. It had to do with a person Samuel had spent 19 years pretending did not exist. But I am getting ahead of the countdown, and if you know me by now, you know I don't like to rush a story any more than I like to rush a Sunday dinner. So let me take you back to where it actually began, long before the surgical gown, long before the phone call, back to a spring evening in a 2-bedroom apartment on the east side, where a 26-year-old woman named Keisha Odom fell in love with a man because of the way he apologized to a waitress. That's the detail people never believe. Not because he brought me flowers or wrote me poetry. Samuel Whitfield could not write a grocery list without misspelling something, but because on our second date, at a diner that smelled like burnt coffee and better days, he knocked over his water glass, and instead of laughing it off the way most men do, he stood up, got the waitress a fresh rag, and apologized like he'd broken something that mattered. "I'm sorry, that was careless of me," he said, and something in me, something that had spent years watching men treat service workers like furniture, sat up and paid attention. I did not marry Samuel because he was perfect. I married him because he noticed things. He noticed when my mother's arthritis got worse before she said a word about it. He noticed when I was quiet in a way that meant I needed space, not comfort. For 18 years, that noticing was the architecture of our whole life together. Through my father's funeral, through 2 miscarriages that nearly broke something in me I still don't have language for, through the birth of our son Jude, through Samuel losing his logistics job in 2019, and finding himself again 3 long months later. We built something. I want that understood clearly before I tell you what came apart. Because a story about betrayal only means something if you first believe in what was betrayed. If a story like this one, a marriage tested down to its studs, a truth that arrives sideways instead of head-on, is the kind that stays with you after the credits roll, this is exactly the kind of story we tell here at Milan Folktales. And I'd love for you to stay a while and subscribe, because there is more where this came from, and I promise you, none of it ever goes where you expect. Samuel's kidneys began failing him, or perhaps it is more honest to say he began failing to protect them, in the autumn of last year. It started the way these things always start, quietly, with fatigue he blamed on work, and swelling in his ankles he blamed on standing too long. It was Jude, 15 years old and sharper than either of us gave him credit for, who first said, "Dad, your eyes look puffy in a weird way," and something about a child noticing what a wife had missed sent a cold thread down my spine. The diagnosis, when it finally came from a soft-spoken nephrologist named Dr. Gabriel Okafor, was stage 4 chronic kidney disease, likely the tail end of years of undiagnosed hypertension. Samuel had never mentioned to me because, in his words, it never felt like the kind of thing worth worrying you over. I want to tell you that I was angry at him for that silence, and I was, but I was more afraid than angry, because Dr. Okafor's face had the particular stillness of a man delivering bad news he'd delivered many times before and never gotten used to. There are options, Dr. Okafor told us, in the beige little consultation room that would become as familiar to me as my own kitchen over the following months. Dialysis buys time. A living donor transplant is the strongest option if we can find a match. I remember Samuel's hand, finding mine under the table, before I had even finished processing the sentence. I remember thinking, with a clarity that still surprises me, that I would be tested before he even asked. Some decisions are made in the body before the mind catches up to them, and mine had already decided I would give him whatever he needed, the way you decide to catch a falling child before you've even registered their falling. The testing process took 4 months. Blood type compatibility, tissue typing, a psychological evaluation that felt almost insulting in its thoroughness. Did I feel pressured? Was I making this decision freely? Did I understand the risks? And an independent donor advocate named Priya, who sat across from me in a room with soft lighting and asked, more than once, "Mrs. Whitfield, what happens to you if this doesn't save him?" I told her the truth, which was that I hadn't let myself imagine it. I was a match. Blood type O, 6 of 6 antigens compatible, kidney function excellent. Dr. Okafor called it about as clean a match as I've seen outside of a sibling pair, and I remember feeling something close to pride, as if my body had finally done something unambiguously right. What I gave up in those 4 months is not the kind of thing that makes for dramatic television, but it was real. I took an unpaid leave from the elementary school where I'd taught 3rd grade for 11 years, because the surgery and recovery would keep me out for at least 6 weeks, and my principal, though sympathetic, could not hold my classroom indefinitely. I postponed a trip to Charleston I'd been planning with my sister Melby since we were girls, promising ourselves we'd see the Battery together before we turned 50. Melby did not take that postponement well. "You're really doing this," she said to me on the phone one evening in March, her voice flat in that way she gets when she's trying very hard not to sound like she's arguing. "Giving him a piece of your body. Keisha, do you know how many women I've watched give men everything and get a folded flag and a headache in return? Samuel is not those men," I told her. "I hope you're right," she said, and there was something underneath those 5 words that I chose, at the time, not to examine too closely. I have thought about that conversation more than almost any other since. Melby had never liked Samuel with the particular suspicion of a younger sister who watches too closely, who remembers things the rest of us let ourselves forget, and I told myself that was jealousy, or overprotectiveness, or simply Melby being Melby. I did not yet understand that she had noticed something. Not the truth itself. She didn't know the truth any more than I did, but the shape of a man keeping something folded very small and very tight against his chest. There was a saying my grandmother used to repeat to me when I was young, and did not yet understand what it meant. A closed hand can't tell you if it's holding a gift or a stone. I did not think of that saying once, during those 4 months of testing and waiting. I think of it now more than almost anything else she ever told me. The first crack, the first small, easily explainable, almost invisible crack, appeared in February, 2 months before the surgery date, on an ordinary Tuesday evening when Samuel's mother, Odessa, was staying with us for a weekend visit. We were at the kitchen table, the 3 of us, going over insurance paperwork for the transplant, when Odessa said something I did not understand at the time and would not fully understand for months. "You're doing the right thing," she told me, patting my hand with the particular weight of a woman who has decided something is true and does not intend to be argued with. Samuel's father would want this handled quietly, in the family, no outsiders. What outsiders? I asked, half laughing, thinking she meant the hospital staff, the insurance adjusters, the whole impersonal machinery of American healthcare. Odessa's eyes flicked, just briefly, toward Samuel, who had gone very still over his stack of papers in a way I registered but did not question. "Nothing, baby," she said. "Just old woman talk." I let it go. That is the thing nobody tells you about the small cracks. In the moment, letting them go feels like grace, like trust, like the generosity a good marriage requires. It is only in hindsight that letting go starts to look like something closer to willful blindness. I had 18 years of evidence that Samuel was a careful man, an apologizing to waitresses man, a noticing man. And I built my trust on that evidence the way you build a house on land you've walked 1,000 times. I did not think to ask what might be buried underneath. By April, we had a surgery date, the second Thursday of the month, 7:15 a.m., St. Augustine Regional. Dr. Okafor's team would perform Samuel's transplant immediately following my nephrectomy in an adjacent operating room, a choreography he described with the calm precision of a man who had done this exact dance dozens of times. Jude would stay with Melby for the week. My mother, 81, and sharp as ever despite her arthritis, insisted on flying in from Detroit to sit in the waiting room, because somebody in this family needs to pray out loud instead of just in their head. The night before the surgery, Samuel and I lay in bed not talking, which was unusual for us. We were talkers, always had been, the kind of couple who narrated their days to each other out of habit more than necessity. But that night, the silence felt less like comfort and more like something being held very carefully in place. "Thank you," he finally said into the dark. "I don't think I've said it enough. Thank you." "You don't have to thank me," I told him, and I meant it. That's not what love is for me. I'm not doing this to be thanked. "I know," he said. And then, so quietly, I almost missed it. "I just need you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, I never wanted you to have to carry more than you signed up for." I remember turning that sentence over in the dark, trying to find its edges, and failing. I thought it was about the surgery. I thought it was about risk, about anesthesia, about the small but real chance that something could go wrong on the table. I did not understand, could not have understood, that he was not talking about the risk of the operation at all. He was talking about a phone call he already knew was coming. If a marriage can survive silence, the next question is always whether it can survive the truth. We're about to find out together. And if stories like this one, about the difference between love and the lies we tell to protect it, are the kind that stay with you, I hope you'll subscribe to Milan Folktales, because Keisha's story is only just beginning to turn. We arrived at St. Augustine Regional at 5:30 the next morning, both of us quiet in the way people are quiet when they've run out of things to say and are only left with things to feel. Jude had hugged me so hard the night before that I still felt it in my ribs. My mother met us in the waiting room already dressed for church, though it was a Thursday, because to her, this was church. This was the holiest thing she could imagine, her daughter giving a piece of herself to keep a family whole. They took me back for pre-op at 6:15. Compression socks, hospital gown, the particular indignity and intimacy of a nurse asking you to confirm your birth date for the 4th time that morning. Samuel sat beside my bed in a chair too small for his frame, holding my hand, and for a while, for almost 30 minutes, actually, though it felt shorter, everything was exactly what it was supposed to be. Two people who loved each other, facing something hard, together. Then, at 6:47, his phone rang. I did not think anything of it at first, phones ring. But I watched Samuel's face change before he even looked at the screen. A tightening around his eyes, a stillness in his shoulders. The particular reaction of a man who already knows who is calling, and has been dreading it. He turned the phone face down without answering. It rang again. 90 seconds later, he silenced it, and, this time, I saw the name on the screen before it went dark. Jonathan. I did not know a Jonathan. In 18 years of marriage, in every family gathering, every funeral, every reunion, and every backyard, I had never once heard my husband mention a Jonathan. "Who's Jonathan?" I asked. "Nobody," Samuel said. "Too fast. in the voice of a man who has never in his life been a good liar and knows it. Wrong number. Happens all the time. The phone rang a third time, and this time, before he could silence it, I heard, just for a second, just a few words, tinny and urgent through the speaker, before Samuel snatched it up and pressed it to his ear and walked toward the window. A voice I did not recognize say something I would spend the next 39 minutes trying to understand. Samuel, you have to tell her. If you don't tell her before that surgery, I will. I looked at the clock on the wall above the door. 6:51 a.m., 39 minutes to surgery. And I had just heard a stranger tell my husband to confess something to me, in a voice that did not sound like an affair. It sounded like a warning. I have taught third grade long enough to know that children lie in predictable patterns. They lie small when the truth is small, and they lie big, elaborate, defensive, immediate, when the truth is something they are genuinely afraid of losing something over. Samuel, standing at that hospital window with his back half turned to me, phone pressed so hard against his ear, his knuckles had gone pale, was lying the way a frightened child lies. Not smoothly, not confidently, the way a person lies when the truth feels like it could take everything from them. Samuel, I said his name once, evenly, the way I do when a student is about to have a meltdown and I need them to hear me before the tears start. Who is Jonathan, and why does he think I need to be told something before I go into surgery for you? He turned around. In 18 years, I had seen my husband cry exactly twice. Once at his father's funeral, once when Jude was born, and I want you to understand what it meant to me that his eyes were wet now, in a hospital corridor, 40 minutes before I was scheduled to give him an organ. It's not what you think, he said. That sentence. I want to talk for a moment about that sentence, because I think every woman who has ever suspected her husband of something has heard some version of it, and I think we have all learned, the hard way, that it is almost never followed by good news. It's not what you think, is a sentence that exists to buy time, not to offer comfort. It is the sound of a man trying to get ahead of a truth he cannot outrun. Then what is it? I asked. My voice did not shake. I want that on record. I have replayed this moment enough times to know that I did not fall apart in that hallway, though every part of me wanted to. I can't, not here, not like this. Keisha, please, you need to focus on the surgery. We can talk about this after. I promise you, I will tell you everything. You will tell me everything now, Samuel Whitfield, or I am walking out of this hospital and you can find yourself another kidney. I did not mean it, or I did mean it, in the moment, with the particular ferocity of a woman who has just realized she is about to hand over a piece of her body to a man who is keeping secrets large enough that strangers are calling to threaten his silence. But even as I said it, some old, tired, loving part of me was doing the math on how I could possibly walk away from a man whose life I had already, emotionally, committed to saving. He sat down heavily in the chair beside my bed, put his face in his hands, and for a long moment said nothing at all. There's a woman, he finally said. Her name is Maya. She's Jonathan's assistant. She handles his scheduling, his calls, that kind of thing. She's the one who's been reaching out. I felt something in my chest drop, the particular vertigo of a fear being confirmed. A woman. Here it was. The affair. The predictable, exhausting, common betrayal I had half expected since the phone had started buzzing face down on the table an hour earlier. An affair, I said. It wasn't a question. No, Samuel said. And something in the immediacy and the exhaustion of his denial made me almost believe him even as every part of me wanted to disbelieve everything he said in that moment. No, Keisha, I have never touched that woman. I barely know her. I swear to you on Jude's life. Then what is she to you? What is Jonathan to you? You have never once, in 18 years, mentioned a man named Jonathan, and now he's calling you 40 minutes before I go under anesthesia to tell you to confess something to me. What am I supposed to think? 29 minutes, I remember thinking, glancing at that clock again, watching the second hand move with an indifference that felt almost cruel. 29 minutes, and he still hasn't told me anything real. He's someone I've been helping, Samuel said carefully, each word placed like a foot testing thin ice. Financially. For a long time, it's complicated, and it's not what it looks like, and I need you to trust me that it has nothing to do with you or with us. I want to be honest with you about what I felt in that moment, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story like this worth telling. I felt relief, genuine, foolish relief, because I've been sending money to a man named Jonathan, sounded, on its face, so much less catastrophic than the affair I had braced myself for. I remember actually softening, actually reaching for his hand again, actually thinking, we can survive this. Whatever this is, we can survive it, because it isn't another woman. That relief is the emotional misdirection I need you to sit with for a moment, because I sat with it myself for almost 20 more minutes before I understood how wrong I was to feel it. I had convinced myself the crisis was smaller than it looked. I did not yet understand that financial help to a man named Jonathan was not the whole truth. It was only the first door in a house with several more doors behind it, each one leading somewhere darker than the last. 22 minutes. A nurse came in to check my vitals and, seeing the tension in the room, asked gently if everything was all right, if I needed a few more minutes before they took me back. I told her yes, I needed minutes I did not have. The moment she left, I turned back to Samuel. How much money, Samuel? How long? And why does a man I've never heard of think he has the right to threaten to tell me something my own husband won't? Samuel's jaw worked silently for a moment, the way it used to when Jude was small and we were deciding, together, how much of a hard truth a 5-year-old could handle. I did not like being on the receiving end of that particular calculation. I did not like being managed. Almost $4,000 a month, he said finally. For 11 years. I did the math faster than I wanted to. Over $500,000. Money I had never known about, moving out of accounts I had thought I understood, for over a decade, to a man whose name I had never once heard spoken in my own house. Where has that money been coming from? I asked, and my voice, this time, did shake, because I was beginning to understand that this was not a story about infidelity at all. This was a story about a version of my husband's life I had never been shown. The consulting income, he said quietly, the side accounts you never asked about because you trusted me to handle them. I trusted you. I let that phrase sit between us like a stone dropped into still water, watching the ripples move outward, touching everything. 19 minutes. It was at this point, with 19 minutes left on the clock, that Dr. Okafor's transplant coordinator, a warm, no-nonsense woman named Renata, stepped into the room to review final consent paperwork with me. A formality, she explained gently, standard before any donor procedure, just confirming one last time that I understood the risks and was proceeding of my own free will. I looked at the papers in front of me. I looked at my husband, whose eyes were red, whose hands would not stay still, who had just told me he'd been secretly funding a stranger's life for over a decade, with money I had never known existed. Give us 5 minutes, I told Renata, and something in my voice must have carried more than I intended, because she looked between the two of us with the particular gentle wariness of a woman who has seen more hospital room crises than she'll ever put in a chart, and quietly stepped back out into the hall. If someone you've built a whole life with turns out to be a stranger in one specific, hidden corner of themselves, I think that's one of the loneliest feelings a person can have. And I think it's worth talking about honestly, instead of pretending it doesn't happen to good marriages too. That's exactly the kind of truth we sit with here at Milan Folktales. And if it's resonating with you, I hope you'll stay with Keisha through what's coming. And subscribe, because some truths don't arrive to destroy us. They arrive to stop us from destroying ourselves without ever knowing why. Who is Jonathan? I said again, slower this time, giving every word room to land. And I want the truth, Samuel, all of it. Not the version you think I can handle, the real one. Samuel was quiet for so long that I thought he might not answer at all, might let the 14 minutes remaining on that clock simply run out around us in silence. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed, lower, rawer, the voice of a man setting down something heavy he had been carrying so long he'd forgotten how much it weighed. "My father had another son," he said, "before he married my mother, a woman he was involved with in the early 70s, before any of us existed. Jonathan is my half-brother, Keisha. He's 61 years old. My father supported him quietly his whole life and swore my mother to secrecy before he died, because it would have broken something in her to have it public. The shame of it. In her church, in her family. And when my father passed, that responsibility, that promise, came to me." I sat with that for a moment, the machinery of the room humming around us. And I want to tell you that my first feeling was not anger. It was something closer to grief. Grief for a man, a whole human being, who had existed at the edge of my husband's family for 6 decades, present enough to be supported, invisible enough to be unspoken. "That's not a crime, Samuel," I said slowly. "That's not even a betrayal. A hidden brother, a promise to your dying father. That's sad, but it's not the kind of thing that should have kept you silent from me for 18 years. Why didn't you just tell me?" 12 minutes. And this is where I want to pause the countdown for just a moment, because this is the exact point in the story where I believed, foolishly, that I finally had the whole truth. A hidden half-brother. Money quietly sent for over a decade. A dying man's promise. It was sad. It was a secret kept too long. But it was not the kind of secret that should have shaken a marriage to its foundation. I did not yet understand that Jonathan's existence was not the deepest secret in that hospital room. It was only the door behind which the deepest secret was standing, waiting for its moment, and that moment, I would learn in the next 11 minutes, had everything to do with the reason I was lying in that bed at all. Samuel's phone buzzed one more time, not a call. A text message, this time, and I watched his face go the particular gray of a man watching his last excuse disappear. "It's Maya," he said quietly, staring at the screen. "She says Jonathan's outside, in the hospital lobby. He drove 4 hours to get here, Keisha. He says he needs to talk to you before they take you back." 10 minutes. I looked at my husband, the man I had trusted with 18 years of my life, the man whose child I had raised, whose apologizing to waitresses' tenderness had once convinced me I understood the whole shape of him, and I asked the only question that mattered anymore. Why is a man I've never met driving 4 hours to stop my surgery, Samuel? What does Jonathan know about my kidney that I don't? Samuel did not answer with words. He closed his eyes, and in the particular silence that followed, I understood, with a clarity that felt almost physical, that the real story, the story underneath the story, had not yet been told at all. 10 minutes. There is a specific kind of silence that exists only in hospitals. Not peaceful, not restful, but taut. The silence of machines counting down towards something irreversible. I sat in that silence with my husband, watching the clock, watching him watch the clock, and I understood that whatever he said next would be the truest thing he had told me all morning, because there was no more time left to soften it. "Jonathan is a match too," Samuel finally said. "A better match than you, actually. 6 of 6 antigens, same as you, but with none of the risk factors your testing flagged in December. The borderline blood pressure reading, remember, the one Dr. Okafor said probably wasn't anything to worry about? Jonathan doesn't have that. He's healthier, he offered, Keisha. 8 months ago, he offered to be my donor." I remember the exact sensation of that sentence landing in my body. Not like a slap, which is what I expected, but like the floor of a room I thought I understood simply giving way beneath me. "You had another donor," I said slowly, "and you let me go through 4 months of testing, 4 months of appointments and blood draws and psychological evaluations, 4 months of taking unpaid leave from my classroom and postponing a trip with my sister. You let me get on this table, 40 minutes from surgery, while a healthier match sat available the entire time? It's not that simple." "Then make it simple, Samuel. You have 9 minutes." He rubbed his face with both hands, and when he spoke again, his voice had the flat, exhausted honesty of a man who has finally run out of rooms to hide in. "If I let Jonathan be my donor, I would have had to explain who he was. Not just to you, to my mother, to my sisters, to the whole family. At the exact moment my father's affair would become the headline of my transplant, instead of a footnote nobody ever had to look at directly. My mother is 78 years old, Keisha. She has spent 40 years building her whole sense of dignity around nobody ever finding out. And some selfish, cowardly part of me thought, if it's you who saves me, nobody ever has to know Jonathan exists at all. I could keep protecting the secret my father made me promise to keep, and still get the transplant I needed, and I told myself that was protecting my mother. But it wasn't only that. Then what was it, Samuel? What was the rest of it? 7 minutes. I was ashamed, he said, so quietly I had to lean forward to catch it. Not of Jonathan, of myself. Because the honest answer, Keisha, the one I haven't even said out loud to myself until right now, is that some part of me was afraid that if you knew there was another option, a better option, medically, you might not have offered at all, and I wanted. I think I wanted to know that you loved me enough to give me a piece of yourself, even when you didn't have to. I used your sacrifice to answer a question about my own worth that I should have never asked you to answer. That's the truth. That's the whole, ugly truth. I sat with that for a long moment, watching the numbers on the clock above the door tick down, feeling something inside me that was not quite anger and not quite grief, but some third thing, older than both, the particular ache of understanding a person completely for the first time in 18 years of marriage. There is a thing my grandmother used to say, one I did think of in that moment, finally, at last. A man will let you carry his cross so long as it makes you love him more. But love built on a hidden option is not love. It's a test he never told you he was giving. Samuel had not lied to me because he did not love me. He had lied to me because some fractured, unhealed part of him needed proof that my love was larger than logic, larger than the safer, easier, less costly choice that had been sitting available the entire time. He had made my sacrifice a referendum on his worth, and he had done it silently, without my consent, at the exact moment I believed I was giving him the most generous gift of our marriage. 4 minutes. Renata knocked gently and stepped back in. Mrs. Whitfield, I know this is a difficult morning, but I do need an answer soon. Are you proceeding with the donation, or would you like more time? I did not answer her right away. I looked at Samuel instead, at the man crying quietly in the too small chair beside my hospital bed, and I asked him the only question that mattered. If I walk down to that lobby right now and meet your brother, if I let Jonathan be your donor instead, will you finally, actually, tell your mother the truth? Not to protect me, not to prove anything to me, because it is the right thing to do, and because a 61-year-old man has spent his entire life on the outside of a family that owes him more than a monthly check and a locked door? Samuel looked at me for a long moment, and something in his face, some old, defended, frightened thing, finally cracked open. Yes, he said, I promise you. Yes. 2 minutes. I want to tell you that the decision I made in that room was simple, but it was not simple at all. Some part of me, the part that had spent 4 months preparing my body and my heart for this exact sacrifice, still wanted to go through with it, still wanted to be the one who saved him, because I had built an entire identity around that generosity over the preceding months, and letting it go felt, in that moment, like losing something of my own. But I thought of Priya, the donor advocate, asking me months earlier what would happen to me if this didn't save him, and I understood, finally, standing at the edge of that question, that the truer version of the question was different. What would happen to me if I let this surgery happen for the wrong reasons? Not to save my husband's life, which Jonathan could do just as well, but to answer a question about my worth that I should never have been asked to answer in the first place. I told Renata I was not proceeding, not that morning, not until Jonathan had been given the chance to make the choice that should have been his to make 8 months earlier. I will not pretend the rest of that day was easy. It was not. There were tears in that lobby I did not expect. Jonathan, 61 years old, silver at the temples, with Samuel's exact laugh lines despite having never once, in his whole life, been introduced to his father's other family, at a holiday table, standing there in a windbreaker, with his hands shaking, saying, I just didn't want him to let a good woman cut herself open for me when I've been ready to do this the whole time. There was Odessa, called in on speakerphone from her kitchen in Detroit, going silent for 11 full seconds before she finally said, in a voice thinner than I had ever heard from her, Let him in. Lord forgive me. It's long past time. Let him in. Jonathan's surgery took place 3 weeks later, once his own testing was finalized. I sat in the waiting room beside Odessa, who held my hand the entire 5 hours the way she might have held it for her own child. And somewhere in that waiting room, between the vending machine coffee and the muted television playing a rerun neither of us watched, something in our family, finally, quietly, came back together in a shape that included everyone it should have included all along. Samuel and I did not simply return to what we had been before. I want to be honest about that because I think the tidy version of this story, the one where a marriage survives a secret and emerges exactly as strong as it was before, is a lie almost as dishonest as the one Samuel told me. We went to counseling. We had conversations in our kitchen at midnight that were harder than anything we'd survived in 18 years together. Harder even than the miscarriages, because grief is at least honest about what it's asking of you, and betrayal makes you question what you thought you already understood. But we stayed. Not because staying was easy, and not because I needed to prove anything about the size of my love. We stayed because Samuel finally, fully, told the truth. To his mother, to his sisters, to Jude, who took the news of a previously unknown great-uncle with the particular unbothered grace of a teenager who simply added Jonathan to the family group chat and asked if he liked basketball. We stayed because a marriage that survives a secret honestly told is worth more than one protected by a silence, however well-intentioned that silence once believed itself to be. I think about that morning often. The clock on the wall, the countdown, the particular terror of almost giving away a piece of myself for a reason I would never have consented to if I'd known it. I think about Jonathan, 61 years old, finally welcomed to a family dinner table this past Thanksgiving, sitting beside his brother, both of them laughing at some joke only the two of them understood. 20 years of separation folding quietly into something that almost looked, from where I sat, like it had always been meant to be there. In the final scene of my memory of that day, there is one image I return to more than any other. The hospital wristband they had already fastened around my wrist that morning, the one printed with my name and my birth date, and the barcode that would have tracked my body through a surgery I ultimately did not have. I kept it. It sits now in the top drawer of my dresser, next to my grandmother's wedding ring, a small plastic reminder that the truest gift I ever gave my marriage was not the organ I almost donated. It was the sacrifice I chose, at the very last minute, not to make. Because sometimes the greatest act of love is not proving how much you're willing to give away. It's asking, clearly and without apology, why you were never told you had a choice.